First of all, welcome on behalf of Illuman, but let's welcome each other. And we're going to start with, after I introduce each group we're going to welcome, we're going to just say ho together, all right? We've done this before. We can do this. So after I've done that, I'll put this up, and that's your cue. So would our international brothers please stand up? Our brothers from Germany, the UK, Canada. All right, let's just see you. Welcome, brothers. And we're off to a great start. All right, so let's have our brothers who are here for the first time at an Illumin event or a males event. You've never been in this kind of a group before. Please stand. Wow. All right, 1, 2, 3. Whoa. Good. Now the rest of you, welcome back. Thank you for trusting us yet again with this event. We're just delighted to have you, and you know what you're in for. So I'm kind of the warm-up act because these guys are really the teachers, but I wanted to address 3 topics. So as a warm-up act, you can lower your expectations right now. The first thing I want to talk about is Illumin, who we are, what we're all about. For some of you, that will be a refresher, and for those of you who are new to our work, it hopefully will provide some orientation to what we are all about. Then I want to talk about how do you show up for one of these events? What's the best way for you to be here? And then the final piece I'm going to talk about is, what do we mean by becoming more whole? What does that mean? It's in the title of our event. And how do we connect coming together with wholeness? All right. So Illumin, I'm going to just cover very quickly, but we are an organization that focuses on providing men with programs that are all about life-giving spirituality and giving men an opportunity to participate in a community that allows you to do your inner work in the presence of something much greater than all of us, and that we sometimes call God or the divine. Our starting point is always that we are brothers, beloved sons. That's our starting point, and that we journey together in community in what we call the journey of illumination. That's a particular path we talk about that allows you to get your arms around a healthy masculine spirituality. Our job this weekend, it's not just going to be our job, it's all of our job, is to create that community together. And I want to talk about how we do that. Knowing that it's under the influence of something much bigger than all of us, and that we put ourselves at God's disposal, at the disposal of the divine, to be together in a way that allows us to explore our inner work and to do that safely. And we also know that when we try to do this, we don't all do it to ourselves. It's done to us by that power that's greater than us. And that's why Illumin exists. That's kind of our unique gift to the world, that we create a community where men can do their inner work, seeking a healthy masculine spirituality that we know is done to us by something much bigger than us. That's it. Now, the second topic I want to talk about is how to show up. And when I talk about this, I'm going to tell you, don't do what I did the first time I came to one of these men's events. I met Richard Rohr in 2002 at the Franciscan Renewal Center in Phoenix, Arizona. And he said to me, Damien, you should do a men's rites of passage. I said, okay, Richard, I'll do a men's rites of passage. And off I headed in 2003 to the MROP, which was held here in New Mexico at Ghost Ranch. Except, and this is kind of where the story goes downhill, I travel a lot, and in all of that travel, I have only ever missed 2 flights. And I fly 3 or 4 times a week. I missed 2 flights. I missed my flight to Albuquerque that morning. And I decided to get in my car and drive 10 hours from Phoenix to Ghost Ranch. And on the way, I stopped at Albuquerque Airport to pick up the bags that had traveled without me. So I arrived in my Ford Mustang, all pumped up for this event, and was taken aside, because I arrived like 4 or 5 hours late, and told, when we meet, we keep the edges hot. Well, what does that mean? Well, the first thing it means you show up on time. Clearly I violated that one. And then the second one was follow instructions. Now the instructions said, if you can't show up at 4 o'clock, don't show up at all. But I showed up at 9 o'clock. So there are the first two things about keeping the edges hot. Show up on time, follow instructions. One particular instruction that is very helpful when we're together is to observe silence. So when you're asked to leave in silence or be in silence, try to honor that request we might have of you. And then the final part of keeping the edges hot is be mindful to what's going on inside you and around you with a non-judgmental lens. So that twin lens of being able to observe but without judgment. We do all of this because we take this work seriously, and if we don't take it seriously, men don't take it seriously. And the next thing about showing up is to observe your judgments. I'll tell you, the second part of my Ghost Ranch story was after I had been shamed about being late and all that stuff, they said to me, oh yeah, and you're going to be sharing a cabin with Mike, the Marine Corps sergeant. So immediately I was struck with terror because I'm thinking he's probably a big burly guy who's pro-war and kind of is really tidy. And so all of these things started playing out in my mind because, you know, I'm really not that tidy, and I certainly was not pro-war at the time. So I trudged off, and any of you who've been to Ghost Ranch, well, it's quite a walk from, I'm doing the walk of shame. It's kind of all going downhill from where I arrived to my cabin, and I arrived and I meet Mike, and it turns out he's in his late 20s. He's a conscientious objector who was court-martialed for not wanting to go to the war in Afghanistan. So I immediately realized all of the things I thought I knew about this man, I had really no clue. And that's kind of what I hope we can create together, is that we don't think we know anything about our brother, that we suspend our normal judgments that we have about each other, and that we create that space for not knowing. That's really important in our work. And the final one that's kind of really important that we talk about is parking your identity. We all have this great need and desire to be approved of, so we create these stories that are very sanitized that say, this is who I am. So mine is, hello, my name is Damien. I'm a blah, blah. And I specialize in blah, blah, blah. And I live in blah, blah, and I do blah, blah. So it's kind of something that I can tell you that will immediately make it safe for you to be in a relationship with me. And we know that we're only scratching the surface when we start talking about those identities. So if your normal identity is Father Tom, I really hope we don't have Father Tom here today, or Dr. James, or Farmer Fred, just park that identity, that normal way you might describe yourself. For our purposes, we are brothers. For our purposes, we're just brothers. None of those identities. Because you're not what you do, you're not where you live, you're not how much money you make, you're not even about the fact that you're trying to save the planet. Two more things, and then I'll kind of move on to the final topic. Our teachers will stretch you. That's why we have them here. They're going to challenge you. And you all know when we're a bit stretched, we want to go back to our room, take a nap, call our honey and kind of explain how the drumming went this morning, or in some way kind of not do that stuff that they asked us to do. And I'm going to invite you to lean in. And our teachers will invite you to really lean into those areas where you feel uncomfortable. And we'll do that in council. Council is our way of being together. It's a group process. Group process sounds terribly kind of scary, but it's just a way of where men can be together without the usual judgments and where we can contemplatively listen to our stories and tell our stories. That's really what council is. You don't need to know anything about it until you get into your council, and the man who is leading the council or council carrier will tell you what you can expect. So show up with beginner's mind and some curiosity. All right, so that's how, if we can all show up in this way, we'll do a massive job of creating the kind of community that will allow you to do your work, that will allow you to become more whole as a man. And that leads me into my next topic, which is about wholeness. Now, here's the problem with becoming more whole. You have to talk about where you're broken. You have to talk about those parts of your life where you don't feel whole, or where you feel out of alignment with who you think you should be, or who God is calling you to be, or who Buddha is calling you to be, whoever it is that is your guide. But you have to talk about those parts of you that sometimes are unspeakable. And that requires vulnerability. And you know what to say about vulnerable men? They're weak. That's our challenge in this work, brothers, is that the minute you become vulnerable, there is a sense that you are becoming weak. Now, we turn that on its head, and we say, you actually are becoming courageous in talking about that which is unspeakable. So I want you to think about vulnerability as courage. It's a big problem for men because I actually did a little bit of digging. And this is what's considered a norm for a man today, a cultural norm for a man today, according to psychological researchers. You should be able to control your emotions. You should put your work first. You should be able to attract and retain a woman. And you should pursue status. Those are what are considered norms for men. What we're saying is, we're going to buck that system. We can be vulnerable. We can have the courage to be vulnerable. That's what our work is about. We do it through our ritual. We do it through counsel. And we do it in our conversations over coffee. Because there's something that trumps all of that that's much bigger. And that is that we are hardwired to connect. Every study in neuroscience, neurobiology is proving this over and over again. We are fundamentally wired to connect with each other. And that other bullshit gets in the way. We're going to try and unwind that this weekend. Elio Delio has a beautiful quote that I want to share with you that captures this. Every human person desires to love and be loved, to belong to one another, because we come from another. We are born social and relational. We yearn to belong, to be part of a larger whole that includes not only friends and family, but neighbors, community, trees, flowers, sun, earth, stars. We are born of nature. We are part of nature. That is, we are born into a web of life, and we are part of a web of life. So I want to recap this in kind of plain language. We all want to connect. We become whole in community, not individually. You can't do your spiritual journey alone. You just can't. We men are challenged with that based on our culture. Because to connect, we have to become vulnerable, and vulnerable is associated with weakness. But we shatter that because we consider becoming vulnerable being the most courageous thing that you could do with your life. So I'm going to make this a little bit more personal. So I spent probably years of my life, probably from the age of 14 until I was 38 or so, being absolutely preoccupied with hiding who I am. It consumed an enormous amount of energy because the minute I would walk into a group of people or meet you for the first time, I would ask myself, can I really tell you who I am? Still happens a little bit. Still happens a little bit. And then I realized that this battle was not worth living. Even on my trip up to Ghost Ranch, if it took me 10 hours to drive up there, 5 of those hours were spent wondering could I tell all these religious guys that I'm gay? Could I be honest about the truth of my life and risk rejection? Because that's a little story that played out in my head. Now, so I get to Ghost Ranch, and I'm all in my head thinking, if I tell these guys, are they going to kind of kick me out, or what's going to happen? And then I see more than 100 men sitting down and pouring out the stuff of their lives. Raw emotion, sharing their pain, talking about their brokenness, and being willing to be vulnerable. And it was a massive place of healing. Didn't expect this. And that's the place where we become whole. So this weekend, let's create that space for ourselves. Let it be the gift we give each other, that we can be who we are, with no need to maintain our identities, our status, or anything else. We're just here to be brothers to each other. Whole. I want to take us to take maybe 10 minutes. I've got 3 questions for you to reflect on here. We're not going to move out just yet. Those 3 questions, one of them may appeal to you, or all 3 may appeal to you. Just listen. You'll know which one is the one you need to spend some time with. There's no perfect answer. So we're not going to kind of say, right answer to the question at the end of this exercise. These questions are meant to take us into a different place, not necessarily to that place of being right or wrong. First question, and I'll repeat them. So, what work has brought you here? What work has brought you here? Second question, what is the most courageous thing you could do for yourself this weekend? What is the most courageous thing you could do for yourself this weekend? And the final question is, what vulnerability does this require of you? What vulnerability does this require of you? You can journal, just sit in silence, reflect on those for just 10 minutes.